feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry and this is Dewbs & Co, the show where we'll be getting into all the things that have got you talking today. And in an effort to move on from Partygate, the Tories have come out fighting. A blitz of policy ideas are circulating, including things like freezing the BBC licence fee for 2 years, bringing in the military to tackle the channel crossings, and a whole lot more besides. Many are critical, saying all this stuff is basically being created on the back of a fag packet as a distraction. Many others, though, say, why does any of that matter? Surely it's time to move on. Where do you stand? And Prince Harry is seeking a judicial review against a refusal of the Home Office to allow him to personally pay for police protection when in the UK. What do you think to this? Can a royal level of protection be for sale? Or should it be like our honours system, something that money cannot buy? And speaking of the police, should they be given extra powers to stop large demonstrations and protests? I ask because amendments to the police and crime bill that might see that happen are being debated in the Lords pretty much as we speak. We'll have that and more coming up. First, the latest news headlines.
Michelle, thank you. I'm Polly Middlehurst in the GB newsroom. Our top story today, the Home Secretary says the UK is now sharing intelligence with the United States following the synagogue terror attack in Texas. Malik Faisal Akram, a British man from Blackburn in Greater Manchester, was shot dead in the States after holding 4 people hostage during a 10-hour standoff on Saturday. His brother says he was suffering from mental health issues. 2 teenagers arrested in Manchester in connection with the attack are being questioned as part of the investigation. The Home Secretary, Priti Patel, addressed the issue in the Commons earlier today.
I had a bilateral call with my counterpart for Homeland Security in the US. And let me just say a few things. First of all, we are working with the FBI. In fact, we have been since the incident took place, and there's a great deal of intelligence sharing and work taking place on this. Of course, when it comes to our own domestic homeland, there are a range of measures that are being undertaken right now, including protective security for the Jewish community.
Meanwhile, the Home Secretary is also warning MPs to be on their guard about foreign agents. It follows claims that solicitor Christine Lee, who made donations to political parties, is a suspected Chinese spy. Priti Patel said Miss Lee's connections with MPs were cultivated to make the UK government more favourable to Chinese interests. In other news, the body of a British woman who went missing during a tsunami in Tonga has been recovered by her husband. Angela Glover from Brighton was swept away by extreme waves as they inundated the Pacific island following an undersea volcanic eruption. Her brother said she was trying to rescue dogs from her animal shelter when she disappeared. Here, there are growing concerns for the welfare of an 18-year-old woman who disappeared at the weekend. Marnie Clayton from Bracknell was last seen leaving a nightclub in Windsor at 2 a.m. on Sunday. Police are appealing for help, saying her disappearance is out of character. The Culture Secretary has today confirmed the BBC licence fee will be frozen for at least 2 years. That's despite BBC bosses insisting there's a strong case for taxpayers to continue investing in the corporation. Nadine Dorries wants to find a new funding model for the British broadcaster. She told the Commons earlier on today the pinch on people's bills played a part in her decision.
The global cost of living is rising, and this government is committed to supporting families as much as possible during these difficult times. Given that climate, we had to think very carefully about imposing potential increase on the TV licence.
Nadine Dorries. Prince Harry says he and his family can't return to the UK because it's too dangerous. He's now challenging a Home Office decision which prevents him from personally paying for police protection in the UK. He lost his taxpayer-funded security when he moved to the United States, and Prince Harry says his private team doesn't have adequate jurisdiction or intelligence in the UK. Amazon has reversed its decision to stop accepting Visa credit cards on its website. The move was meant to take effect from the 19th of January following a dispute over payment fees. But in an email to customers, the online retailer says it's now working closely with Visa on a potential solution. And lastly, a giant asteroid bigger than any building on Earth is expected to soar past our planet tomorrow. Even though it is more than half a mile wide, scientists are saying the rock poses no threat to us here on Earth. The asteroid will pass 1.2 million miles away, which is more than 5 times the moon's distance from the planet. Phew, we're safe. On TV, online and DAB+ radio, you're with GB News. Now more from Dewbs & Co.
Thanks for that, Polly. Well, keep me company until 7 o'clock is my panel. Ali Mirage, who's a columnist at The Article and founder of the Contrarian Prize, and Emma Burnell, who's a political consultant, and journalist and author Ella Whelan. Good evening to all of you. Also, as well, you know the drill on Dewbs & Co. It's not just about us and our thoughts, it's about you at home and yours. You can get in touch with me, gbviews at gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at Michelle Dewbs or at GB News. I want to know what is on your mind tonight. What has got you talking? I have to say, I've got emails flying in as I'm speaking to you at the start of my programme about the news. Well, we announced it earlier on, I think, this afternoon, about every day now, the programming on GB News will be kicked off with the national anthem at 5:59 a.m. Got to admit, I'll probably be asleep for that, so I'll have to watch it on catch-up. But it's certainly got you guys talking. What do you think to that? Is that something that you've been wanting to see on TV for a while? Will you be setting your alarms extra early to catch that? Get in touch and let me know your thoughts, or let me know all your thoughts about any of the topics that we're discussing today. So to our first one, I mean, Partygate. You know, I was about to say after a week dominated by Partygate, but it feels like a lifetime. I literally feel like I have been talking about parties for months now. But anyway, Boris Johnson has had enough and has come out fighting. There's been a raft of policies which have been dubbed Operation Red Meat. I've no idea who comes up with these titles. I can assure you it's not me. But Operation Red Meat, though, it is known by many at the moment, and it's believed that these policies could be revealed over the next 2 weeks. Let's have a little butchers at what they could be. Do you see what I did there? Well, it's things like bringing in the military to tackle the Channel migrant crisis, reforming the way the BBC is funded, scrapping Plan B COVID restrictions, and pushing through the Levelling Up White Paper, which is due to be published next month. Actually, some of them, by the way, there's quite a few more. The Prime Minister's critics are saying that he's staking his future on these policies as a way of trying to basically deflect the public's attention from Partygate. Many others, though, say that these policies matter to the public and very much help the Tories win the last election. But surely, though, it is time to move on from Partygate, concentrate on these policies and others, and just move on with life. What do you think? And first, let's turn to our paneller. Ali, what's your thoughts on this? Operation Red Meat?
Well, indeed, Michelle. Look, as a part-time club DJ, I like a party as much as the next person, but not in a lockdown. And I think this is the problem that the Prime Minister's got. It's one of credibility and trust with the British public. And a bit like in 1992, after Black Wednesday, John Major could never really recover. And Theresa May, after that disastrous election in 2017, also could never recover. I think Boris Johnson is definitely in the last chance saloon. And if his MPs don't kill him off now, I can't really see him going to the next election. I may be wrong. Maybe he turns it round, but I think he's on a very sticky wicket. I mean, just on some of these policies that you were talking about, Michelle, this is really the classic Linton Crosby dead cat strategy. Linton Crosby being Boris Johnson's election strategist, won him 2 mayoral elections in London. And the dead cat strategy is, if there's an issue that's causing you severe difficulties, and at the moment parties are the issue, put a dead cat on the table so everyone starts talking about that and not about the issue that's causing you all the grief. Hence, he's talking about today about the Navy patrolling the Channel to try and deal with this migrant issue where we've had about 30,000 people crossing the Channel in the last year, also now freezing the licence fee. But what about the cost of living crisis? What about the fact that as of April, national insurance is going up, inflation's going up, energy bills are rising? That's the thing that's really on people's minds. Not a peep out of the Prime Minister on that. I think this is all distraction tactics, and I think Tory MPs, after the weekend they've had, will be pondering how long this can go on for.
Ella?
I think that it's really quite insulting, because what the government seems to be doing is treating voters like dogs. You know, you wave a ball. I mean, you talk about the cat strategy. You wave a ball around and throw it, and we're meant to follow the ball. It's incredibly insulting. It's also reflective of how I think the government, and particularly Boris Johnson, thinks about how we view the parties. Because you're right, Michelle, everyone's sick of talking about parties. Lots of people, I think, watching this all play out over the last few weeks will have thought, well, you're working in a building, you go into the garden, you know, who's died, what's the big deal? The problem is the focus has been on whether or, you know, and this impending investigation from Sue Gray is going to be whether or not someone was or wasn't inside the garden door, whether they were holding a bottle of wine in their hand, all the specifics. When the real issue is, was the government right to implement such restrictions as allowing the police to arrest people or who are sitting alone on benches, preventing people from meeting up outside? You know, were the general sense of what happened in lockdown, you know, particularly the first one, but then in successive ones, necessary, right, fair, socially healthy? And I think by just getting let off the hook in relation to this one particular party, deflecting it by sending out the Navy to chase a few migrants in a dinghy, which, by the way, I think is pretty disgusting, is, you know, I think it completely ignores the real thing that we have to be talking about, which is, should this government be held to account for its actions, many of them undemocratic, many of them passed without parliamentary scrutiny over the last 2 years. I don't care who's had a drink with who in the garden of Downing Street. I care about the policies that Downing Street and the Prime Minister and his cabinet members passed over the last 2 years.
Yeah, Emma, I mean, Ella, God, my panel today. Emma, Ella, Ali. It sounds like I'm about to burst into a rap song, but I'm not. Emma, Ella there talks about, following, around and being like a dog, etc. But actually, I don't find this insulting. I find this a sensible manoeuvre by the government to actually move on with life, because at the end of the day, I personally am someone that was very frightened of COVID in this first lockdown. I was terrified of it. I was pregnant. I was terrified. I was livid with everyone and anyone that broke rules. But then I learnt a little bit more about COVID, life moved on a little bit, and I have just moved on a little bit. So for me, seeing talk about policies was music to my ears. And I also don't blame the government for actually wanting to get a hold of things as opposed to just being letting the news agenda be manipulated by people with, quite frankly, an alternate agenda. They're not people that care about the health and safety of the public. They're doing it to bring down a Prime Minister that they don't like. You're frowning at me. That's not a problem. You're allowed to disagree. Tell me your thoughts.
Well, I think I have a number of thoughts. First of all, I don't think it's true that this is some sinister forces trying to manipulate the public into caring about things that they don't. I think there was a lot of scepticism from the media that the public would care. And this crisis blew up for the government because they really, really did.
But you must concede that the way that this has been leaked, the frequencies in which it's been leaked, the drip, the drip, the drip, the drip, that is carefully curated.
Oh, absolutely. And whoever's doing it, and I can't imagine who it might be, clearly knows a thing or two about media manipulation. But they've got a lot to work with. And if the government didn't want to be run by a psychodrama, they probably shouldn't have allowed so many psychos to be involved. I think what actually matters, the red meat here is not for the public. Who it's for is the small group of backbenchers, Tory backbenchers, who Boris Johnson is worried are going to take his job away. And you don't just make policy up on the hoof, just like that, just because to try and please a few people. And also, by the way, he is not the first
which one
Tory
do you think
Prime
is just
Minister.
Made up?
Well, I mean, I think the idea that the Navy can do something the RNLI can't in the world's busiest shipping lane is actually a bit weird. I think the idea, and just randomly...
Of course the Navy can achieve something that the RNLI... That's a bizarre point. If you look at things like...
what, they're going to do, shoot them?
If you look at things like in Australia, where they had a concept called Operation Sovereign Borders, which was very led by the military, many, yes, I understand it's got some controversial aspects to it, but many would argue that that was successful. So I don't understand the contrast that's saying, well, what can the RNLI do that the Navy can't?
Because what Australia have done, amongst other things, is offshore immigration, which has nothing to do with sending Navy boats out. What Navy boats out do is give you a good picture on the 6 o'clock news, and that's all he's after.
Right, so what else do you think they've made up on the hoof?
Well, this whole attacking the BBC, again, it's about what plays best in the 1922 Christie.
That's been talked about for years.
They've been talking about something. They're announcing it now with very little ground laying, very little understanding of what it actually means. Nadine Dorries has stood up and said, we're going to do something. Everyone says, what? She says, dunno. That's not the way to do policy.
Now they've come up with a plan.
Yeah, the thing is about, in particular, in relation to the immigration thing, Emma's right. Just sending out a few boats as a kind of, I think, semi-publicity stunt isn't going to do anything in relation to what we know is a very complex picture about immigration. I care very much about the sovereignty of our borders. I also care very much about the fact that because of the West's actions in places like Afghanistan, there are an insubordinate amount of people trying to, people who are in desperate situations, trying to find a better life for themselves. That's not going to be fixed by, as you called it, back of a fag box policy that's been created in order to
But we do have an immediate thing that we need to stop people risking their own lives.
Yes, and we should have a... Sorry, Ali, but we should have... This should be part of a wider public debate. We have never had... You often talk on this programme about the importance of democracy. We have never had an open, public, informed discussion about immigration in this country. We didn't have it in relation to Brexit. We didn't have it post-Brexit. And yet we have boats flying around. One of the policies that you announced was the removal of coronavirus restrictions and Plan B. If the government's serious about changing its tack on coronavirus, it won't just remove Plan B. It will remove all restrictions, including things like people in care homes, residents who are still being refused access to their families. There's a whole load of stuff that the government has to review, and you can't just tick box it away.
Ali Mirage?
Well, to be fair to Boris, frankly, he's been shooting himself in the foot multiple times over recent months. A lot of unforced errors, from Owen Patterson's sleaze debacle to who paid for his wallpaper and who didn't. Mm-hmm. But look, on the substance of the issue about the Navy patrolling the Channel, this is the latest in a long line of tactics that have been tried by the Home Secretary, including trying to offshore some of these asylum seekers and migrants to Ascension Island. That never happened. Now they're talking about Ghana and Rwanda. They also had this policy of trying to look at these big vessels to try and create large waves to try and push these boats back, which by all accounts could have actually resulted in capsizing of these boats and people's deaths. So we're going to have to see how this plays out. But the reality is that optically it's been looking very bad for the government, that on Get Brexit Done, one of the key issues was controlling the borders, and they patently failed to do it. We've given 54 million to the French. It hasn't made any difference.
Ali, there'll be people watching this, shouting at their tellies, going, well, the government cannot win. They cannot win. They do nothing. They get criticised for doing nothing. They try and do something. They get criticised for trying to do something.
The wrong thing.
They then
There's a difference between something must be done and doing anything.
I mean, they've got to think of creative solutions, trying to deploy the Navy.
They can't buy every dinghy in France.
But you can come over on a ferry. You can come over on a plane. If you want to have an asylum system, I've said this a million times on this programme, actually, if you want to have an asylum system that works, you decide the rules and then you make sure it's safe and fairly accessible.
But
the moment we're playing this double game where the government and people living in Britain like to say that they love refugees and it's all nice and come over and we're so great. And then there's, at the same time, discussions about wave machines, a really barbaric thing. So the two don't add up.
One other thing, Ella, just on the BBC point, by the way. I think the BBC and the future of the BBC is a hugely important debate that the public needs to have, right? We need to have a debate in this country about what we expect from a public service broadcaster, what that looks like in an era of Netflix and Amazon Prime and other streaming services. What role does a public broadcaster play? And how does a public broadcaster avoid the appearance of any sort of bias, which is a very difficult thing to do. And the BBC's come in criticism a lot of times for things like the proms, and we laugh at all these things, but they're serious and they matter to a lot of people. And Tim Davie, the new Director General, seems to have his head screwed on quite properly, understands that there's going to be a licence fee discussion coming down the track. He's also got a new chairman who's Rishi Sunak's ex-boss. So they understand it. So we need to have a public debate. We can't just do this on the hoof. Apparently by 2027, the licence fee is going to be abolished, but we haven't had any discussion about it.
Absolutely.
Well, I have to say, there's a lot of disagreement with some of the things that you guys are saying. I've got lots of emails coming in. And I have to say, lots of people do support. I mean, I could pick a number of these different policies that are being talked about at the moment, but a lot of people would say that we don't need a debate. Let's just scrap the licence fee, full stop. That's the sentiment that's certainly coming through on my email at the moment. The whole thing about introducing the military to try and stop people illegally crossing the channel, that is getting huge support in the emails that are coming through as well. There's also suggestions such as drives to bring down the NHS waiting lists that are on this Operation Red Meat. I mean, I have to say, I would push back on there and say, well, if you're so desperate to bring down waiting lists, which you should be, by the way, why is God only knows how many thousands of people potentially about to lose their jobs because of vaccine mandates? So that circle doesn't square for me. There's also suggestions in Operation Red Meat about extra money for jobs and skills training to help people out there. That'll tick a lot of boxes. Levelling up. There's suggestions and talk there about levelling up. Lots of you are coming in and saying this whole Boris bashing situation has to stop. And I do say, I do get a sentiment of the guy can't win. Sometimes I feel like the government can't win. All of these conversations about should these restrictions ever have been in place in the first place, I would certainly say on reflection, no. And we will hopefully have a very good investigation at the end of all of this, which does look back at everything that the government did when it comes to all of their COVID responses. Anyway, do keep your contacts coming in on the email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at Michelle Dewbs or at GBNews. I'm going to take a quick break, and when I come back, we'll be looking at Prince Harry. He's fighting the Home Office to be allowed to pay for his own police protection when he's in the UK. What's wrong with that? Well, we'll have that conversation after the break.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Hello there, welcome back to GB News. I'm Michelle Dewberry. I was just about to say it's 6 o'clock, but it's not. Time flies when you're having fun. It's gone 20 past 6 now. Just a reminder, by the way, because I know some of you will be listening on the radio, so I just wanted to remind you of the voices that you can hear. I am, of course, Michelle Dewberry. Ali Mirage, who's the columnist at The Article and the founder of the Contrarian Prize. We've got Emma Bernell, who's a political consultant, and Ella Whelan, who is a journalist and author. So that is who is on the panel tonight. Anyway, let's talk Prince Harry, shall we? He reckons that the UK is too dangerous for him and his family to visit without state protection. So much so that he's taken legal action against the government to allow him to privately pay for police security when he's here in the UK. Of course, Harry lost taxpayer-funded police security when he and Meghan stepped back from royal duties 2 years ago. They pay for private security in the US, of course, where they live now. But his legal team say that the Duke's American private security team don't have adequate jurisdiction abroad or access to UK intelligence information required to protect him, his wife, and their children. Well, earlier on today, we had the security expert Will Geddes talking to Eamon and Isabel on breakfast. Let's have a listen to what he had to say.
Well, again, it's, security isn't just about sort of putting yourself in the way of harm. It's about planning the dignitary's visit or the prince's visit and ensuring that there is suitable security around the venues that he's going to be staying at or visiting, the accommodation where he's going to be staying. You know, there are many, many instances, Isabel, that a lot of close protection and personal protection is about planning and managing that trip rather than necessarily jumping in the way of a crossbow or a bullet for that matter.
Well, what do you think to this? Do you think that he should be given UK security whilst he's here? Do you reckon that he should be able to pay for that? Should he get it for free? Emma Bernell, your thoughts?
I don't think he should get it for free. These are very, very rich people. And if they're not entitled to it because they've renounced UK, their role, where they would normally get special protection, then I don't think the rest of us should be paying for it. But I tend to think that way more generally about the royals. I probably have the same minority view on the royals as many of your listeners have been saying about the BBC. Why should I have to pay for them? But I do think that there's obviously going to be a security risk when high-profile people come to the UK. There should be the best possible coordination between their teams, simply because if that didn't happen and then the worst happened, it would be worse than not doing anything. Prevention is generally better than cure, investigation, more investigation.
Ella?
I tend to agree. I mean, I'm not being the biggest fan of the monarchy. It equally irks me, the idea that there has to be this level of, not security, because obviously no one wants anyone to get hurt in the abstract, whether you're a royal or you're a everyday pleb like the rest of us. But the background to this, I think no one can miss, which is that there has been this particular dynamic between Harry and Meghan and the rest of the royals, in which, in particular, Prince Harry, or former Prince Harry, has taken this position of wanting to have all of the celebrity and all of the fame and all of the kudos given to, and the privileges given to the royal family. I mean, I know he's renounced the sort of formal ones, but the fuss, he wants the fuss, but he doesn't necessarily want to be part of the firm any longer. Now, I couldn't give a monkey's whether he is or isn't in the club because I don't particularly like the club, but I can understand why people would feel like they were being taken for a ride, that somebody who has spent such an inordinate amount of time over the last year or two trashing his fellow family members and the institution of the Crown to now come and say, well, I want to have all the privileges. I mean, I think, isn't there an easy answer to this, which is if he wants to pay for him, let it. I'm sure the American security services are pretty good. If he needs a bit of information, give it to him. But the fact that this has become such a fuss, I think shows you the nature of the changing dynamics within the royal family. I think that's all to the good because I'd like to have a wider discussion, talk about wider debates about the future of the royal family. And if Harry's going to be the harbinger of doom for the royal family, well, then so be it.
Ali Mirage, your thoughts?
Well, I am actually a huge fan of the royal family, and particularly of Her Majesty, who I have the utmost respect for, and long may she reign. On Prince Harry, he decided himself that he wanted out from the family and he wanted to pursue another life in America, and that's his choice, and we can all respect that. It's a decision he made of his own free will. We can't be providing police protection to Prince Harry every time he comes to visit his grandmother to introduce her to her new grandchild. I mean, you can't have that. And I think that look, Princess Anne, his aunt, had an attempt on her life in 1974, and she doesn't have full-time police protection. So why should Harry, sort of on an entitled ego trip, be expected, even if he's paying for it himself? We don't have close protection officers hanging around to be at Prince Harry's beck and call. They've got other duties to do. Right. What I would suggest is he brings his own security staff over. I think Ella's got a good point. If the police have certain intelligence information that they feel is necessary to share with Harry's protection team, they should do that. But they shouldn't be providing full-time police protection to him, regardless of whether he pays or not. And the very fact that he's now taking this to judicial review in the Platinum Jubilee year of his grandmother, when she's having to deal with the whole fallout from Prince Andrew as well, is just in really poor taste, in my view. And I just think it's a complete sideshow. We need to move on from this. And the Harry-Meghan soap opera is getting a bit tiresome.
Yeah, Emma, he would push back and say, I'm just a father wanting to keep my family safe. He would say that he does feel that his kind of statue would put him at higher risk when he comes to this country. And therefore, all he would ask is, I want to have that level of safety that protects my children, my wife, and me. And if I'm willing to pay for it, why not? And this is the kind of argument. The flip side for this, of course, is if you let him pay for this because he feels that he is, I don't know, someone that's at higher risk. What do you do if George Clooney decides that he wants to come to the UK, promote his film, but then there's some higher risk of him being a terror attack or something? Should he get it? Would he get it?
I would just like it to be known that if George Clooney needs close protection,
you're there.
I'm there. I will take that bullet.
He might be watching. You never know. You never know, Emma. And you've put yourself a good word in there, though. That is for sure. But yeah, it's a strange one, and it's also a divided opinion. Stu says, well, what if it's dangerous for me to walk around? Where's my state protection? And I guess the argument is, Chris says, well, Prince Harry has made his bed, so now he's got a lay in it. He's stamping around like a spoilt child, and he should pay for his own security. But that's the thing, Chris. He's saying that he would pay for his own security. The debate here, if you like, he's saying he would pay, because I'm sure he would know the taxpayer response if he didn't say that he would pay. The problem is, the government is saying, no, this isn't a kind of off-the-shelf security package that you can just pay for because you feel like you want it, because they would argue that if you give it to Prince Harry because he feels is at more risk, then where do you draw the line? What about other people that would then say, well, I want that level of protection, I want to be able to pay for it? So I guess, Chris, the argument there is not about whether or not he would pay for it, it's whether or not he should be able to pay for it. So do keep your thoughts coming in. Lots of you getting in touch about that last topic we had as well, particularly about the RNLI. That sparked a lot of conversation online. Again, people are saying about Boris bashing continues, talking about the Operation Red Meat is aimed not at the public, but at Redwall MPs who will keep him in a job. I think that was the point that you was making as well. Alison says, Michelle, there's loads of private security companies that Harry could hire. Let him do that. But again, I think the sentiment is what he wants, and perhaps it is a sense of entitlement. What he wants is that level of royal protection, and that's what's not forthcoming. Although, of course, it was forthcoming at his grandfather's funeral, but not when he went to the unveiling of the statue of his mother. And I think that's where this has all started from, because, Ali, he was saying that there was a risk. Paparazzi, I think, were chasing his car or something like that. And that's kind of what sparked this conversation, isn't it? The fact that he felt there was a risk when he came back for that statue unveiling.
That's right. I think the difference between Prince Philip's funeral and the statue unveiling was that in the view of the police, one was deemed a security risk because it was a state funeral, and the other was not. It was an unveiling of a statue. Look, I think the bottom line is, right, that Harry is made a decision with his wife to go and pursue a different life. They do a lot of charitable work. They tell us that they're going to transform the world one act of compassion at a time. I must say, I'm so overwhelmed with the compassion that Prince Harry metes out, I can barely cope. I mean, Michelle, look, wherever you go, you're mobbed by people. Wherever you go, you don't have your own close protection officers. I mean,
in my dreams, I'm mobbed.
Perhaps.
By people.
I mean, I'm mobbed in my own dreams. But the point is this. Look, yes, Prince Harry should obviously have security. He's got his own security teams in the US where he lives. He's got ex-CIA officers, special branch officers working for him already, which he pays for privately. I just don't see why he can't have that. The argument is that they don't have the same level of intelligence or connections in the UK to make him feel safe. I think that there's a halfway house here where the police can provide intelligence that they can provide to his close protection team, and that's the way it should be done. We do not have off-the-shelf police officers hanging around to be used at Prince Harry's beck and call whenever he wants to come over for a visit to visit his friends or his family. We just can't have that.
And isn't this a couple that have made a huge deal when talking about killing us with compassion? Have also made a huge deal about their carbon neutral credentials as well. So, flying all over the place for for funerals, but for statue unveilings now, for jubilees, can't you just zoom in, cut the security, cut the green, cut the carbon footprint?
Is a very good point indeed. What about all those carbon emissions? Alison said he should stay in America. It's his choice to go. Well, why don't you stay there then? Erica says, if he feels that unsafe here, don't come, because we don't want him. Interesting. That is a sentiment that's coming through quite rapidly. But Adrian says, hang on, he's still royalty and he deserves protection. Anyway, going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be talking about the police a bit more. Do you reckon that they should be given powers to ban large demonstrations and protests? We'll have that and more after the break.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight, will the government finally be convinced to axe vaccine passports as the resistance lands on their doorstep? Tonya Buxton and Alan Miller of the Together Declaration will join me hours after handing their 180,000-strong petition to Parliament. Plus, the madness of crowds author Douglas Murray will give brilliant insight on an agenda-leading issue. GB News star Neil Oliver and positive professor Carol Sikora return with more pearls of wisdom. And I'll break down the day's biggest stories with my superstar panel, the Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, social commentator Esther Kraku, and senior reporter at the iNewspaper, Benjamin Butterworth. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry. Just been talking about Prince Harry there. Leah's written in and said, why can't we leave the young prince alone? I've got to say, Leah, I think most of us would quite like to. I think there's a lot of better things to be talking about than Prince Harry. However, it's not as simple as that, because as much as he did indeed go to America, the story didn't stop there, did it? And it seems to prod and poke and rear its ugly head quite often at the moment. But again, as I was just saying before the break, the opinion that's coming in does seem to be split. And if you still want to talk about that, you can get in touch with me, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Just a quick reminder for anyone listening to us on the radio as to who my panel is. You've got Ali Mirage, who's the columnist at The Article and founder of the Contrarian Prize. We've got Emma Burnell, who's a political consultant, and Ella Whelan, who is the journalist and author. Let's move on, though, shall we? Because Dragon's Den judge and businesswoman Deborah Meaden has joined forces with 200 businesses and campaign groups to urge peers in the House of Lords to reject anti-protest proposals in the Police, Crime, Sentencing and Courts Bill. They say they're concerned about the future right to protest if the bill is passed. They also say the proposals are an attack on our democracy. The bill's anti-protest measures will give police the power to ban marches and demonstrations that they consider to be, I quote, seriously disruptive, including those that they deemed too noisy. I mean, I did chuckle a little bit there because I have to be honest, as annoying as protests can be, especially if you are caught up in the effects of one of them, that is kind of the intention of them, though, isn't it? To be noisy and disruptive. Anyway, the police, as part of this bill, will also be looking to grant extended stop and search powers, and sentences of up to 10 years could be handed down for damage to memorials or statues. The Lords are voting on some of these amendments tonight. So if I focus on the protesting aspect, what do you think to this? Do you think that the police should be given these powers to stop these large protests and marches? Even as I'm saying this, Ella Whelan, I've got the image in my head of that moronic behaviour, in my view, of Insulate Britain gluing themselves to the road and disrupting many people's livelihoods. And I think that image will be fresh in the minds of many. And they'll be shouting at the TV screens, yes, the police should be sorting all this out and stopping this nonsense. But your view?
Well, the important point on that is that the police already have powers to hand to deal with action that crosses the line over from protest, which, as you're right, because you're very right to say, it can be disruptive and noisy, and any good protest is disruptive and noisy, into, you know, whatever you want to call it, public disturbance or, you know, harassment or something. And would take a very strong-willed person to defend the actions of, for example, Insulate Britain or indeed Extinction Rebellion that cavort around Trafalgar Square, stopping London traffic in papier-mâché, as we've seen over the last few years. We know that that is ridiculous and we know that that's annoying. The question is, do you then institute vast-reaching and draconian powers through this police and crime bill that would, in effect, criminalise all reasonable kinds of protest? I mean, the noisy clause is really important because what it basically puts protest on is a level of something akin to, noise levels in a neighbourhood, whether you call the police because the teenagers living in the flat above you are playing drum and bass at 3 o'clock in the morning. It completely negates the political aspect of the freedom to protest and why that is an important part of a healthy democracy. But, I think it was Claire Fox, who's in the House of Lords at the moment, arguing this, pointed this out on GB News yesterday, is that one of the most important and overlooked parts of this bill, it has been the recent amendment introducing stop and search powers. Now, we can have a debate about stop and search in relation to things that already applies to knife crime or terrorism and stuff like that. But this would be bringing in stop and search powers for someone who would be, the police might suspect would be going on a protest. Now, you tell me what that means. Does it mean that somebody has a placard in their bag? Is it somebody that's going to go and shout a slogan? This is, I think, really, we've just been talking for the last sort of half an hour about the government grandstanding with legislation. And I think this has Priti Patel's hands all over it as a means to try to show that the government is tough on things like Extinction Rebellion, Insulate Britain. And it sets a very dangerous precedent for the freedom to protest. I think anyone with a liberal bone in their body should absolutely stand against this bill. It's a kind of terrible irony that it's been left up to the Lords, an unelected chamber, of which none of us have a say in who is in there and who says anything in there, to be the last bastion of freedom, defending freedom of protest. But there you go, that's where we are.
See, Ali, I've never in all of my life been on a protest. And if you'd have asked me probably 2 years ago, would I ever imagine I would go on a protest, I would say no. I couldn't have imagined a scenario that would take me out to the streets. I've always found protests to be a little bit annoying when you get caught up in the aftermath of them, especially the Insulate Britain ones that I've just referred to. However, now I could imagine, and I can't believe I'm about to say this sentence, but I can imagine me taking to the streets if we get much further down the line of this vaccine coercion. I'm so anti it. I can't even tell you how anti-vaccine mandates, etc. I am. And I feel we're on a slippery slope. And that is a cause that would motivate me to get onto the streets and be disruptive and be noisy and protest, because it's a passion it's a cause that's close to my heart. So when I apply my thought process to the other projects that people are equally as passionate about, then I have to kind of concede that absolutely, as much as they might annoy me, they do deserve that right to be able to be out on the streets disrupting, being noisy and making their point heard.
Well, absolutely. And there is the right to protest peacefully is an absolutely fundamental part of our democracy. No one's disputing that. I mean, you remember, Michelle, a few years ago, before the Iraq War, 1 million people marched on the streets of London to no avail. I was one of them, by the way, to no avail, but we marched. And we did so peacefully. What we did not do, and this is where the difference arises, we did not superglue ourselves in front of cars with parents trying to take their kids to school or ambulances trying to get sick people to hospital. I mean, what's going to happen with people like Insulate Britain when someone dies on the way to hospital? And by the way, the whole Insulate Britain thing, I find rather puzzling. We all understand the point about insulation. We're not stupid. We get it, right? But you had Liam Norton, one of the leading spokesmen of Insulate Britain, when asked on a radio station if it insulated his own flat, admitted he hadn't, and then went on to say, I don't really care that much about insulation. Well, then why are you wreaking havoc on people's lives and livelihoods if you don't care about it? We all understand the challenges posed by climate change. We need to be sensible about this. And what they should be doing, Insulate Britain, is instead of wreaking havoc on people's lives, why don't they going up to councils who try and in conservation areas, stop people in townhouses, by the way, installing double glazing sash windows, which they hand make. Why don't they try and get that arranged, where people are stopped from doing that, which will allow lots of cold drafts to come in the house, and you totally inefficient. Why don't they put their ire on councils rather than people trying to do their job? So I think the government's got it right here. I think there needs to be new legislation. To Ella's point, it does need to be scrutinised. There have to be safeguards, but I think the direction of travel is right. We need to clamp down on this kind of process which wreaks havoc on people's lives.
On the Insulate Britain thing, obviously I am indeed a little bit obsessed with it because they really did annoy me. But I would blame Emma. The media, I think the media really did prolong and extend that process from Insulate Britain, because if these people went and superglued themselves to, I don't know, whatever road, they very swiftly got yanked off by the nearest lorry driver. Well, that sounds awful, but you know what I mean? If they got pulled off the road, I'm going to give myself the giggles now. If they got pulled off the road by the nearest motorist and then everyone went about their business, that would be the end of it. But the media couldn't help themselves. They was there quicker than a quick thing from Quickland, reporting on it every 5 seconds. So they got the attention, that cause got the attention that they wanted and kept repeating the behaviour. So you could actually remove some of this mass disruption by doing things like the media just being a bit more sensible about how they report it. You don't need to have these draconian measures.
I mean, I think the measures are ridiculous for a number of reasons. Firstly, as Ella says, it's just anti-democratic. We should have a right to speak up against things and for things.
She's talking to you, by the way, Ali.
And I'm being contrarian, Ali. But I think, the thing is, there are going to be protests that I fundamentally disagree with. And I, too, was on that Iraq march. And a couple of weeks after that was the second biggest march that we've had in our history, which was to try and keep fox hunting, something that I disagreed with that march 100%. I 100% agree with their right to have it. And that's the point. But even more than that, apart from that fundamental philosophical point, there's a real practical element here. Should the police be policing what annoys us when they can't even police people being raped and murdered at the moment? We have a massive problem with actual crime work. And what we're doing is adding a whole bunch of new powers to say, oh, well, you're quite annoying and a bit noisy on the street, please.
Yeah, but Emma, they were preventing people getting to work, getting their kids to school.
Yeah, but Ali, I mean, if you, super gluing yourself to the road is a particularly stupid thing. I mean, I think when I was at university, people used to do it and they'd super glue themselves outside Sodexo or like do all these kind of stunts, naked protests all over the place. You know, we can name any kind of number of ridiculous things. But say the nurses go on strike for pay and shut down the hospitals. Say bus drivers or indeed taxi drivers block the roads in London for some kind of industrial action. You know, tube strikes. There are things in which workers have to use the freedom of protest and strike action to cause disruption, which can have huge ramifications. It can mean that people don't get to where they need to go, get treatment, get seen. But that's a means through which workers utilise their power and prove that they are necessary.
But should there be a limit?
But this is hypocrisy, Ella. Hypocrisy when these people don't. Leading spokesman of Insulate Britain doesn't even insulate his own flat.
I know exactly, and I share your frustration. And there is so much of the climate protests that are filled with hypocrisy and are indeed themselves undemocratic, because so much of the nature of the climate protest is about stopping ordinary people from having a say in the future of the planet. Instead, they want us all to just insulate our houses or don't eat red meat, whatever it is that Extinction Rebellion picks up on. So I'm with you there on the hypocrisy of the protest. What I don't want is to mimic that undemocratic trend within those protesters by allowing a government to bring in legislation that does not benefit a free and plural society, but instead closes down on the action we're allowed to take. You just have to look at what precedent is set. Everyone, as we've all said, everyone can name a protest that they don't like. But the question of a freedom to protest is not that for those of your friends or your comrades. It's for everyone, those people who you vehemently disagree with as well. That's what a healthy democracy looks like.
Well, Robert's emailed in saying, I'm all for the freedom to protest, but no one should have the right to disrupt the lives of others to further their political aims. Anne says the last bastion of freedom of peaceful protest should not be made illegal. Yvonne says protests should be excluded from this bill. They are taking away our freedom of speech. Bernard says, but all this will only work if when carrying out the sentencing, if they caused, for example, criminal damage or assaults on police.
Which are already illegal.
Yeah, he's on about actually the sentencing of the I think we all know what's been referred to there. Derek says that protesters must be made to pay for the damage they cause, and I am in favour of the bill. But Linda says definitely no more laws on protesting. It should be our right to protest. There you go. And I have to say, I cannot get Insulate Britain out of my head now. Those images of people supergluing themselves to roads for God knows how long. Anyway, don't get me started on that one again. Now, let me ask you, when is a snake not a snake? And when is a duck not a duck? Why am I asking? Well, the animal charity, the RSPCA, has revealed its funniest calls that it received last year from the public. They include the RSPCA receiving a call reporting a dog squealing and crying tethered tightly to a canal boat in London. When inspectors arrived, they found a stuffed toy tiger that had been tied to the bow of a boat. A concerned motorist called the RSPCA to say they'd spotted a swan that they thought had been tangled in electric fencing and was struggling in a river in Bournemouth. Officers arrived to find a white plastic chair floating in the water. And a member of the public called in the RSPCA and emergency services after spotting a snake on the roof in West Yorkshire. Officers arrived in the dark and tried to tempt the snake down from the roof with food, only to discover that it was a headless rubber toy. I've got to say, that to me would have looked like a snake as well. I'm not sure that I would have called out the RSPCA, though, to come and assist me. I probably would have got a broom handle or something and given it a wallop with that. Have you ever called the RSPCA to an animal type situation, Ali?
I haven't, but I can tell you I live in East London and there are a lot of brazen foxes roaming around my garden all night, in the front as well, and they're just not scared at all. I mean, you can't do anything. So I really wish the RSPCA could help us do something about them, but no, I haven't had calls to call them. But look, all animals should be protected and cared for, and the RSPCA do a very important job.
Emma, Ella, any RSPCA stories you want to finish with?
No, but I do have a literal cat burglar.
Do you?
There's a neighbourhood cat who has worked out how to open my cat flap that it's supposed to open only with my cat's chip. He pulls it open, clever little bogger.
Sneaky.
And comes in and steals my little Smudgy's biscuits.
Ella?
I've actually had the RSPCA come and knock on my door, not because I engaged in fox bothering, although I'm tempted because they're all over my garden as well, but I'm not going to don a kimono and a baseball bat, whatever that story is. But I was once walking home after a night out with a friend and she saw a little baby squirrel on the road, and I carried on walking because it's London and how many squirrels do you see? And she stayed behind, said she was going to look after it, and gave my home address to the RSPCA, who then knocked on the door a week later and said, "We heard there's been an incident with a squirrel," of which, and I was a bit, I had had a few drinks at the time, but I never forgave her for giving the RSPCA my address. So I think they could probably do with a little bit of, judicious assessment of the reports they get before they go around knocking on doors or trying to tempt snakes down from a roof.
Oh, God. Well, I had the opposite of the story that I've just shared there, because I remember being on the M62 many years ago. I used to drive the smallest little car, and I remember seeing a carrier bag in front of me, and I decided to straddle it. I don't know why, but I just did. I thought if I just get it between the wheels and off we go. Unbeknownst to me, it was a dead swan that had been hit. I don't even know how a dead swan ended up on the M62, but it did. And it wasn't very pleasant. And I have to say, that memory has stayed with me for many years. And I also remember when I was about 21, seeing pigeons trapped in a building opposite where I used to work. And I remember ringing the RSPCA up, telling them about these pigeons, and I used to feel really sorry for these pigeons. I used to think about them when I went home at work on a night. See, I did used to be a really nice girl. I did. I don't know whatever happened to me. Anyway, that is pretty much all we've got time for. Thank you very much for your company tonight, and thank you as well to my panel. A reminder, if anyone was listening and not watching, Ali Mirage, Emma Burnell and Ella Whelan. Thank you as well for keeping the comments in terms of what you want us to be talking about going forward. You can keep those thoughts, gbviews@gbnews.uk. I do read all of them. Someone emailed, and I have to say I was reading it as I started, saying, "You never read the emails." I do. If I don't get a chance to read them all while I'm on air, then I promise you I read them all on my way home. So there you go. Anyway, have yourselves a very good evening, and I'll see you tomorrow at the same time, 6 o'clock until 7 o'clock. I'll see you then.
Hi there. We keep the widespread clear skies overnight, and of course at this time of year that means temperatures will drop like a stone, widespread frost and fog forming. But cloudier weather towards the far north will tend to keep things frost and fog free here. That's where the mildest areas coming around the top of this area of high pressure, but of course near the centre of the high with light winds and clear skies. Widely foggy conditions for much of central and eastern England in particular, some very dense fog forming quite quickly after the sun goes down. Some fog patches in the south and southwest. However, here there'll also be some low cloud drifting in from the south, so that will complicate things. But a cold night for many, touch of frost in eastern and southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, but widely across England and Wales. Temperatures in towns and cities -2, in the countryside -5. Freezing and foggy first thing then. But as cloud drifts in from the south, well, that will tend to lift the fog in places. 1 or 2 patches holding on into the afternoon in the east of England, for example. Otherwise, a lot more cloud around, I think, compared to Monday afternoon. And that cloud thick enough by the end of the afternoon in western Scotland and Northern Ireland to give some showery outbreaks of rain. The rain turning more persistent later as a bunch of weather fronts sink southeastwards across Scotland and Northern Ireland, pushing the cloud and rain then into northern England, parts of West Wales overnight. That, of course, means there'll be a lot more cloud in the sky on Tuesday night into the start of Wednesday compared to previous nights. And so any frost and fog tending to be more limited, not entirely out of the question, just not as widespread as recent mornings. The cloud and showery rain moves south across central and southern parts during Wednesday morning, quite quickly clearing so that after lunch, many places are in the brighter or even sunny skies behind the weather fronts. Showers follow, those showers turning wintry across northern Scotland, and then on Thursday into the east of England as well as eastern Scotland. It's going to feel cold on Thursday and Friday, but there will be some sunshine.